Good evening, everyone, and welcome into Sports Hub STL and the City Hub postgame. This show brought to you by Hot Shots, St. Louis's home for all the games, all the time since 1990. Find yours at hotshotsnet.com and by DraftKings. The crown is yours. I'm Matthew Rocchio, joined as always by Will Bratton to talk a little bit of a City postgame and unfortunately another loss for St. Louis City SC. That's 4 in a row. But they did get a goal this time for the first time in those 4 games. The end result still the same. No points taken for St. Louis City, dropping all 3 again, this time at home against the league-leading Columbus Crew. Will Bratton again joins me. Will, your thoughts on an unfortunate loss for St. Louis City SC?
Yeah, Rock, thank you for having me again tonight. Super excited to be here on the Sports Hub STL City Hub postgame show brought to you by Hot Shots. For me, the number one thing of the night, the most, popular topic people are going to want to talk about. Joao Klauss gets on the scorecard. First goal in 20-something appearances. Been quite a long time for Joao Klauss and a long time coming for City fans. And for me, that's, of course, the big thing everyone's going to want to talk about. Pompeu getting the assist on there, getting his name on the scorecard as well for the first time in a long time. These are really, hopeful signs for a weakened City side. Down 6 starters against probably, one of the best teams in all of MLS, definitely a top team in the Eastern Conference. So, it's hard to be too pessimistic after a performance like that.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And obviously a lot of people, not just the first goal that actually counted for Klauss, but a lot of people are going to be talking about the goal that didn't count for Klauss. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the set-piece goal that gets called back because of the offsides call. You can go to my Twitter, @RockSTL, and you can see Olaf Melberg's answer. He wasn't too happy about that one. He did not agree with the take there, and honestly, I can't disagree with him. We asked Joao Klauss about it as well. He says that the angle from the locker room that he saw, it's a goal, but he did, and you got to appreciate a guy there who has this kind of wide view. He said, but there might be an angle out there that we're not seeing that might have been offside. So I appreciate Klauss for doing that. We're not going to be anywhere near that calm because the way I see it, I thought it was pretty clear that the defender's leg was keeping Klauss on sides, and therefore it should have been a second goal. Melberg's piece on it was he disagreed with it, obviously, but I think Melberg's piece, and if you're an NFL fan or heck of a fan of a lot of sports here in America, you've had this argument before, which is don't make the call on the pitch. Let the play happen, and then go to VAR afterwards to decide whether or not it's not a goal, not whether or not it should be a goal. And I think that was kind of Melberg's takeaway from the play. Your thoughts on the non-goal that will be just as big of a story as the actual goal?
Yeah, and the first thing I want to talk about here is what really is the rule, right, associated with VAR. Obviously, in the last few years, MLS has made a big push towards using VAR. And they've gone so far as to encourage linesmen to not make calls until the fourth official has gone into their ear and confirmed what they initially said into the mouthpiece, right? So in this case, we saw a linesman make that call immediately without waiting. And so therefore, in order to go to VAR and review it, they now have to provide a camera angle to the center referee from the truck out front of the building that tells them there is a potential clear and obvious error here that we need you to review. And the fourth official or the VAR assistant, deemed that there was no clear and obvious error. So the center referee never got to see it. The center referee, it's not his fault. He had never saw the play. And I just see it as a really bad example of refereeing and communication. I don't really think that's the way it should be handled. When you have something that close, it should be going to VAR no matter what. If they had gone to VAR, had a camera angle, we didn't, and said it was offsides, I wouldn't have complained. It's not the fact that they called it offsides; it's the fact that they didn't review it. That's what's going to keep me up at night. So, for me, my clear and obvious radar says that's a goal and it should have been reviewed. My clear and obvious radar also says that if I'm the referee in this situation, I'm calling it a goal, and I'm allowing VAR to give me the chance to look at it if they think it maybe wasn't a goal, because I feel like that's the way it's called. But
yeah, clear and obvious, make the call on the field, fine, and we can move on. That close, I don't want the official on the field making it. I'm okay with going to VAR there. Ryan Fraley talking about the officiating, saying officiating is not an excuse for our tactics being bad. And Ryan, I'm just going to ask you to jump back into the comments and give me a little bit more on what you thought was bad about the tactics. We're obviously going to be talking tactics here in the postgame show, but as usual, with our City Hub postgame and all of our postgame shows here on Sports Hub STL. It's your show, even more so than it is mine and Will's. So jump into the comments. Let me know your thoughts specifically. Ryan Flatley again saying that the tactics were bad. I disagree with that. We just got done talking to Timo Baumgartner, and we talked to João Klauss, we talked to Olaf, and one of the things that I was going for was, my big angle today was, why press highest of the season against a team this talented, and did that help City maybe get back into their usual comfortability factor? And Timo talked about how when you have a team that's as talented as Columbus, but they actually do show that their one mistake is that they will turn the ball over when you pressure them, then the only way to get enough chances and enough good chances to beat this talented of a team is to just barely tip the odds in your favor. And the way you can do that is by forcing those turnovers, creating those shot chances like Simon Becher got late in the game, which is the exact example that Timo Baumgartner gave. So right off the bat, I disagree with Ryan Flatley's point just because I like the pressing tactic. On just surface, I always like a pressing tactic more than a non-pressing tactic. But clearly, they had a reason for this, and I think it'd be hard to argue that it didn't work within the game relative to the goals that were scored. And honestly, the second goal that was scored, the winning goal, was a case of them not having enough guys back, which you could blame on the press, but I honestly wouldn't. Everyone sat back really far. They sat back really far back in the back five. The midfielders were a little bit late. And then Rossi was just able to sit in what would usually be Hartle's spot and just bang that one from 30 yards out. And so I don't have a problem with parts of the tactics, at least what we've talked about so far. We could get into some other parts I might have an issue with later on. Your thoughts, though, Will, on what you saw from the tactics in this game, but also specifically the high press getting broken out.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of things that Timo Baumgartl said, for me, one of the things he mentioned that was the most important was setting the tone physically, right?
Yeah.
And obviously, Jake Place coming in and saying, finally, a Timo start. And yes, I agree. It's been great. But, and to that point, too, he mentioned wanting to get in rhythm. And he actually implied that he had been telling the coaching staff to not play him until he could get rhythm. That could have been why we saw him go yard with City 2 previously. And also again, why. Yeah, go ahead.
Context there. He has not played a lot of first-team football over the last 2 years. Dealt with the cancer scare. Then he had issues with the management of the team that he was on, so they weren't playing him. They released him. So he just hasn't played a lot of first-team soccer. That's a really good point for a lot of people who were bothered by not seeing Timo before this.
Yeah, and I think it's really awesome that we were finally allowed a little bit of insight about this because there have been a lot of question marks going around social media, and even on this wonderful Sports Hub STL postgame show brought to you by Hot Shots about why is Timo Baumgartl not starting him? Why is the only time we saw him for like 6 minutes at striker? These are pretty funny things here. And, at the end of the day, now we've got him on the pitch. We've got the answers. We know what it was. And we saw him put in a good performance. And for him tactically, saying that one of his tasks was to step up and be a second midfielder at times, and watching him have done that on the pitch, and it was extremely successful. We saw Akil Watts, when he was at right back, clearly also knew that assignment to drop in underneath, especially at the end of the game. Alfredo Morales doing the same thing, dropping in behind for Timo to be able to step up and be the ball handling center back that we signed, the one that we've been waiting to see on the pitch. So, I'm a happy camper in the Timo Baumgartl world at the end of the day.
I understand people are very excited about his passing numbers, but I do want to point out his very first pass after he got that steal, he did turn it over, and he also I think he was only like 10 of 22 I think those passes, so I think he might have been below 50%. Again, that should tell you a player's passing percentage is not always indicative of their passing skill. He's a very good passer. I just thought it was funny that everyone was harping on the passing that he was going to bring in, and that he actually didn't put up crazy numbers there. Chat City Tactics always welcome in our chat because he brings a lot of City Tactics. How about that? Hello, friends. Klauss. That is all. I mean, we talked about already. Just getting the monkey off the back is a huge moment, but also just that play is so indicative of what we need to see from City going forward. In the Austin game, we saw the impact of Klauss and Pompeu. Last week, although obviously didn't lead anything in the score column or the win column, we like what Celio and Klauss brought. And then today, them combining for that goal and Celio just going to work. And that's exactly what Klauss put it. Klauss put it in the most
Celio doing Celio things.
Celio doing Celio things is the greatest answer that Klauss could have given us for that play was absolutely incredible. So, I mean, I
Yep.
loved seeing Celio do Celio things, great way to put it there. That attack was incredible. The only issue was that they weren't able to get Celio involved more often later in the first half. But then again, no one was able to get involved in the first half because they got completely dominated in the back 15 minutes of the first half. We're getting plenty of other comments here. Ryan Fraley is active in the chat, and we'll let him be. The league is too cheap to pay for auto offside. Yeah. And listen, honestly, we just need to get better offsides rules because I believe
Yeah.
was it UEFA or was it? I think it was UEFA who said they're going to put in Arsene Wenger's rule next year, I think. And Wenger's rule is about there being a line between like this kind of BS, like, oh, your elbow is ahead of the player, so you're offside. They're getting rid of that stuff and making it like a full body has to be offside for it to actually be called. That's, in my opinion, the correct way for the rule to be written. That, in my opinion, is how you call and how you use the rule in the spirit that it was created. This little his elbows across or Klauss's elbows forward, but the defender's foot is behind it, so technically it's offsides. That's BS, and I don't think it's actually the spirit of the rule, which is taking away an unfair advantage for the attacking player in those moments. So I agree with you, Fraley. You gotta simplify those things, and to that point, I think there was some issues. You can call out the MLS. There always are issues with these leagues. You can call out their protocol. He also says Melberg took the gas off the pedal off the gas. I don't agree with this take either here, just because he came out with an extremely offensive lineup, and other than making an extremely aggressive sub when the Yarrow stuff happens, I'm not sure if are you really complaining about the 60-minute subs in this game? I'm not. God, that is so far down the list of things that I would complain about if I was a fan. But if that's what you want to focus on, let me know. Let us know more so in the chat, Ryan. What got your goat and what really made you think they were taking their pedal off the gas or gas off the pedal? Because I disagree with that one too.
Yeah, Rock, I wanted to go back really quickly to one thing you mentioned about the MLS offsides rule. And for me, the most important thing for me is I agree with what you're saying about the rule change and UEFA and that potential rule change and all of that in the spirit of the game. For me, though, I want to see the league just be consistent and have it very in writing and have it done the same way every time, regardless of what they're going to say the rule is, right? Because nothing will frustrate a fan or a coach or a player more than inconsistent officiating. Even if they don't like the call, if that's the rule, it's the rule. And if it's called by the rule, then you're SOL. But at the end of the day, in MLS, we've seen this a lot in cities, 2 1/3 years or whatever into the league, not even a third yet. But there's been some inconsistencies and most often associated with VAR stuff. So those, for me, that's the biggest thing. I just want to see it be consistent.
Jake Plays comes into the chat. I'm late, so I don't know if you all have chatted about it, but Celio has to start. Yeah, that was my mindset before this game. I would have been floored if Celio wasn't in the starting 11 today. And honestly, maybe you could argue that you give him a disciplinary benching because he was playing so reckless with the card in the first half. But I just don't think this team can afford that. His offensive punch is so apparent. He was involved in the one goal that you created in the last 400 minutes. That's not nothing. In fact, if you extrapolate that, he probably has created 3 or 4 of your best chances in those 400 minutes, including the one that actually went in the back of the net. So, yeah, 100%, Jake. I don't know how you could rationalize Simon or Celio Pompeu not getting the start today.
Yeah, absolutely.
It would have been ridiculous.
Looking forward to next match at Vancouver. It's a similar story for me. You put the dog back on the pitch and you put a little more tension on the leash and you let him do what he's supposed to do. Let him do Celio things. Let him take guys on one-on-one, get him the ball in space, let Klauss work with him underneath, let Hartle him, wall him, be fluid, combine, do the things they do. He's got to start again against Vancouver at home at Energizer Park next weekend.
Yeah, Jake Plays. Jordan minutes were very fun, a bright spot for our future for sure. He looks confident and free as opposed to previous minutes where the moment felt too big for him. Yeah, big difference. You get that off season, you grow a little bit physically, mentally. I mean, we the physical factor, I know you're talking about a mental factor, but I mean, just we haven't seen him yet with City, but Miguel Perez is all you need to know just how much a year can make with these young players because, man, he's so much bigger. Makai Joyner has so much promise as an attacking player. Olaf talked about putting him in at left back is a very aggressive move. It's like I like it. I don't think we're ever going to see that again. I do not start penciling in Mekhi Joyner as a wing back for starting 11. That's not going to happen. To that point, Ryan Fraley, this is why I was looking at my computer very confused. I had to rub my eyes because Ryan Fraley said this. Glad someone brought up Joyner. He should be playing instead of Morales.
Those are two pretty different player profiles who don't really do the same thing at all and don't even have the same skill set. So, I mean, I don't know exactly where you're going with that one. But if you want to see more Mekhi Joyner in general, that's a statement I can get behind a little bit more. But one thing we need to talk about is that he only has one more appearance that he can sub onto the pitch or start for St. Louis City SC in 2025, unless St. Louis City SC rework his contract and put him in that remaining slot on the supplemental roster, which is still open. But you can't expect that Lutz Van still will not bring at least one completely new player into the system by the end of the summer window, if not by the end of this current window. In like 10 days, I believe the spring transfer window ends. So that leaves that one spot that you could potentially bring somebody in, or you could see someone like Mekhi Joyner, find his way onto that supplemental open slot that's sitting there.
Absolutely. Chat City Tactics. Seti is one of those dudes that you can just tell when he's not fit and ready. Tonight, he was not fit and ready. Kudos to him for getting minutes since we have no bodies. And, hey, maybe if we want to get crazy with it, maybe Ryan, maybe that's where Mekhi Joyner could slot in next week. I don't think it's going to happen. Right now, I'm not. It took till game 8 for Olaf Melberg to play, like put on the field for a minute, a player younger, 24 years or younger. I do not know if a week later or within the next month or two, we're going to see him giving starts to attacking players below the age of 25. But to Chat City Texas' point, I like Cedric Teuchert. I think Cedric Teuchert has a role in this team. I do not know if that role was the majority of what we saw Cedric Teuchert doing tonight. To your point, he looked really good. I thought at times when they were using him to kind of drop back as a connector to the midfield because he is such a solid player. But it was another game where they were pressing pretty high, and I just don't know how useful Cedric Teuchert can be if that's the part of your game that you have to win the moments to win the game. And based on everything we heard, Klauss said it and Timo said it. To win that game, you had to win the moments where they turned the ball over and the press won. And again, those aren't the moments where Cedric Teuchert is going to be most impactful to this team. So that maybe might be one X's and O's thing I do kind of question of why is it Seti instead of maybe a Simon Bescher right out of the gate.
Yeah, and I kind of agree with you. And I actually put this on X during the match. I said Cedric Teuchert is really not finding the value I would like for him to thus far, and I see a solution. And at this point, I was saying take Teuchert out, put Ustrak on, move Hartle up to that 10. But what I was talking about in terms of him not getting the value I wanted was I want to see him underneath Klauss, especially when Hartle's dropped in deeper. And this was actually talked about on the broadcast. Of course, I'm tuning in remotely here from Starkville, Mississippi, and so I got to listen to Taylor Twelman talk about it all night about our favorite guy to listen to for the whole night, and Jacob Slavin as well. But we saw Teuchert or Hartle much deeper, and so I want to see Teuchert under almost acting as the 10 at times. We've seen him do this in the past, and it's been effective. He had a couple of moments where he did that. In tonight's match against the Crew, but overall I wasn't pleased with the consistency of him finding value on the pitch. I thought he only had a few moments. Of course, he had one moment as like a true striker, if you want to call it, where he just skied a beautiful opportunity, which blew my mind. I mean, he's a clinical finisher. I didn't expect that from him. It wasn't that I was so angry. I was just surprised that he completely wasted that chance because we've seen him, since he came and joined the team. In July of last season. He hasn't done anything like that before.
I've been saying it. Ask Nook v. Thorson. Finishing is a fickle.
Yeah.
Finishing.
Did you see his beautiful goal today?
Yes, I did. Yes,
Thorson scored an absolute banger today.
Finishing,
Isaac Jensen scored 2 beautiful set-piece goals today. I mean,
finishing is the most fickle stat in soccer from year to year. You can have a clinical season, and then you can be completely dead the next year. So, and we've seen it. There's plenty. Like you just brought up 2 more examples. We got Klauss from that first season, and now, I mean, there's examples all over of how finicky finishing is, and that's a great example of Seti skying that one there. Jake plays. I don't know if instead of Morales, but I haven't enjoyed Morales as a starter. He's a good, calm presence off the bench, but I don't think he fits with this team's mentality for a full 90. I'm going to disagree with that because a calm presence off the bench is what this team needs. That's a huge aspect to what this team needs going forward. And so I think he fits this mentality in a great way. And that defensive midi spot, especially in today's game where it was just him and Hartle, I want a calm presence, and I want somebody who isn't going to run as much as everybody else on the team is doing. This kind of game, if Durkin's back there, I feel like he maybe gets caught out of position because he gets caught in that press, and he's such a good runner. They want to use him in the press, but because Alfredo's more of a static player, they kept him just kind of centrally, and he was able to cover that right side of the midfield really well. To that point, I was talking about the second goal earlier. Because Hartel is running a box-to-box game and is getting forward from that deep-lying 6 spot, Hartel's out of position, and that left midfield spot is completely open for Rossi just to sit there. And if you look at that score, or if you look at that shot, Morales is in his spot on the right side of the defense, but Hartel's still running back to his spot from the left side. So I actually think the calmness and the more, again, static nature of Alfredo Morales, it's actually perfect for what they want to do because you need somebody to kind of just be that steady pace when there's all that chaos around him.
And, let's talk about who Morales is playing for right now. It's Edouard Leuven. And what does Leuven do?
Well,
Leuven brings a calming presence to the pitch.
Well, he's playing Durkin's spot. I would say Hartel's playing Leuven's spot.
Yes, but in terms of when off the bench, he's taking out Leuven.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And he's playing underneath there. And overall, talking about, because what Jake said was talking about the team's mentality for a full 90, right? And so you need somebody on the pitch who can bring that calming presence in the midfield. It doesn't have to be at the exact, 6 role that Leuven's playing. But my point is, you don't want everything too calm or too chaotic in your midfield. You don't want 3 Chris Durkins in a triangle running around like absolute maniacs. And you also don't want 3 Edouard Leuvens who are just, trying to calmly move things around because then you don't lose pace in your attack, right? So you need an Edouard Leuven or an Alfredo Morales that can bring a little bit of a calming presence. Again, I'm not necessarily talking about the exact role they're playing, more so about the presence that they bring into that midfield. So,
fair enough. Ryan Fraley says, read Doyle's column about this when he brought up City in his column. He's talking about Matthew Doyle, the armchair analyst. Apparently, he was talking about Joyner as wing back. Hey, listen, Matthew is fantastic. I love all his stuff. If MLS wouldn't take my stuff up off the Twitter and YouTube, I would also love to post clips like he does, but they're not always very nice about that. But I'm just going to – I think Matthew's wrong about this one. Nothing I've seen from Olaf tells me he's going to take a second-team striker and play him consistently as a wingback in this system. I would – listen, if I'm wrong, fine. But
you're not wrong.
I just again, I think Matthew's doing the thing where, listen, I could not cover the entire league the way that Matthew Doyle does. I don't know enough about every team to cover the way the league Matthew does. So I don't expect Matthew Doyle to then understand the extremely detailed intricacies of City's roster and the fact that Olaf hasn't been playing young players and refuses to play young players and probably isn't going to play an offensive-minded player in wingback when the other wingback in Conrad Valm is also a fairly offensive-minded player. So that's the only reason why I disagree with Matthew. That's the issue with a guy who's got to cover 30 teams versus 2 people who are focusing on one team. We are overly obsessed with the little intricacies of those things, and so we would just be shocked if Joyner would start at wingback, and even honestly him playing like a 30-minute sub shift as a wingback in any other situation than they're down 2-1 and they're trying to bomb forward and completely change the game in their favor, which is what they were doing tonight. Charlie Smith says, okay, enough with the fluff. Possession was 68% versus 32%, and passes 626 versus 290. This is a case of, I guess, expectations.
I've got one thing to say here, and that is there is anything that we have learned in a little over 2 years in MLS, it is that possession and passes are not extremely indicative of the better team on the pitch. And they're not indicative of the team that played better in that match. So we need to not entertain that narrative too much in our minds here.
All right, I apologize if this is going to screw with the stats at all or the picture right now, but I'm going to go to a Sova score really quickly. So I just got to look up the second chance. I got to look up the second half. In the second half, City produced 1.02 expected goals. By the way, it's their only second half this season where they produce over 1 expected goal. They've done it in the first half against Colorado, in the first half against Seattle. They have no other halves. They produced
Was it against Galaxy or
goal.
Seattle?
Did I say Seattle? I meant Galaxy. Thank you very much for correcting me.
Yeah,
I meant Galaxy. But this is the first time they've done it in the second half. So they produced 1.02 XG to 0.12 XG in the second half. They only had 41% possession, and they had 180 passes to 281 by Columbus. Again, that's not as stark as the numbers that Charlie's throwing us out there for the full game. But I'm just telling you is that even when they were dominating the game relatively, and if you look at the game impact, wave flow, whatever you want to call it, the up and down, City completely ran over them for the last 10, 15 minutes. So you take up the fact that City was getting chances and was doing well while only having 44% possession and while having 100 less passes. And that should be fairly indicative for you, Charlie, to understand why me and Will are saying those numbers just aren't the worrying thing from this game. They are the league leaders. I think they have 21 points now. They're leading the East. They're leading the entire MLS after picking up 3 points tonight. They are the best team right now in the league. And they are an extremely talented possession team that plays, as Timo Baumgartel said, beautiful soccer. And also Timo said they have answers for everything. So in that situation, you're not going to outpossess them. And you're not going to outpass them. One, because they're probably the best in the league at that style. And two, you're very much not the best in the league at that style. You might be one of the worst. And so you're not going to win that style, so don't play that style. And they didn't play that style, and that's why they, for one, were leading, and two, had a chance to tie this game up, and arguably, based on some of the flow things, could have maybe won this game 3-2 or tied this 3-3 or tied it 2-2. There's a lot of ways they get points, and I just don't think throwing out those two numbers are going to convince me that they got dominated in this game.
Yeah, no, I mean, I completely agree with you at the end of the day. You know, the dust is always going to settle, and you're always going to look backwards, hindsight's 2020, and try and say something about the stats, you know, being this direction or that direction. But when you're looking at the product on the field and you're looking at St. Louis competing, you know, very well against, you know, one of the best teams in the league, you have to come away with a little bit of grace and then just try and look at the things, you know, do a little bit of confirmation bias. Honestly, look at the stats that favor what you saw on the pitch, and you'll start to notice the themes of Olaf Melberg's plan and kind of the things he talks about in his press conferences too, of what exactly is he trying to engineer this team towards doing. It's not supposed to be a possession team. So these are the things you'll start to notice when you kind of look between the lines, or if you don't want to, come here and we'll do it for you. So that's kind of what we do.
Or as Olaf said, the game plan has to be different for every game. And so they might be a possession team against X team fill in here, but they're not going to be a possession team against one of the best possession teams in the league. And a team that they said is the one way they were going to crack them was having them make those turnovers and then pouncing on and finishing those chances with the turnovers. As people have talked about with Seti's chance that you talked about earlier on the counterattack, Simon's chance off the press in the second half, they didn't finish those chances. In fact, Ryan Fraley, this is a great point. Foot Mob has 3 big chances missed. That's why we lost. In fact, it's a great point because the Columbus Crew created 5 big chances in the first half, and they missed 4 of them. They created 1 big chance in the second half, and they finished it. City, on the other hand, missed 3 big chances. So right there, you see it. The entire second half, Columbus had 1 big chance, and they finished it. If City just does that, it's a tie game 2-2. If City hits any of their big chances or just finishes in a way that they haven't been able to all season, it's a completely different game. So it's a great point by Ryan.
Now, the one thing I do want to say is that Joao Klauss's offsides goal would have been a big chance converted that doesn't go on the stat sheets in this case. So it would have been another big chance that St. Louis did convert had it not been ruled offsides. And so that is definitely one thing to think about. But, you know, to Rock's point, at the end of the day, you have, you know, Simon Betcher with 2 grade A chances missed. And then, you know, we've got Toyshirt's grade A chance missed in the first half. And, you know, it's just, you got to be clinical in those moments because good teams like Columbus are going to make you pay when you don't capitalize on the few chances that you are able to create. Of course, St. Louis able to capitalize on 1 from Joao Klauss early in the match, gives up a couple to Columbus, and then you see a 1-2 result that doesn't feel like the most deserved, you know, loss in the column there for St. Louis. So it's those little moments that are really gonna pile up, and you got to be better in those going forward.
Yeah, I think that's a great point here. And again, thank you to everyone who's tuning in right now to the Sports Hub STL in the City Hub post game. Ryan Fraley says, we don't win enough individual battles up front to gain possession, in my opinion. I actually think that battles won was actually one of the few things that kind of was in City's favor this game. Correct, Will?
Yeah, that is correct. We did lead with 52% ground duels and 54% aerial, if I recall those numbers off the top of my head. I don't have them up, but it was something like that. They did actually dominate physically, and that was part of the game plan. But I will say, I actually do, believe it or not, agree with Ryan Fraley a little bit in that I think City didn't really set the tone as much as they would have liked, given that physicality was part of the game plan. I think Columbus were way too free moving in the midfield. I don't think there was enough physicality in the midfield.
That's fair.
So, and we saw this on their second goal. I mean, they just walked right through us.
Do you think it's a lack of physicality from the Morales-Hartel combo, or do you think it's a lack of physicality because of the formation and the fact that there wasn't that third body in the midfield that we've had in all these previous games? You know, previously, Hartel was dropping back. You had Wallerman in center midi, or they had Ostrak who came in late in games because of some switches. But today, because of the 3-forward lineup, there wasn't that third body in the midfield unless it was Baumgartel coming from the back. Do you think maybe that's why we saw the lack of physicality at times?
Honestly, that's a really good point, and I hadn't thought about it that way. And honestly, it's probably playing into it at least a little bit because, you know, I mean, a third body, you know, centrally in the midfield is obviously going to allow for a lot more body-to-body contact, and that's where you set the tone is in those, you know, 50-50 kind of battles. And when you have more bodies in there to win the ball and get on loose balls, especially, those are the moments where you can really set the tone as a midfielder. So that's a really good point. I think that not having that third midfielder in there and having Morales, who's, you know, not necessarily going to be your 2-foot tackle type of guy in there. So, you know, I think that's a really good point.
Ryan says when he speaks of battle, he's referring to the season overall. I was aware we did better in this match. And yeah, it's a great point. I was just pointing out that today they did actually have success in that front, which worked with the game plan. And that's kind of just backing up the points about the game plan. We're going to keep getting to more of your comments here. But before we do, I want to tell everybody about one of our great sponsors. That is DraftKings. The crown is yours. And ladies and gentlemen, I know that it's soccer season. We all love it. But it is St. Louis. And baseball season is officially underway. And it's time to step up to the plate with DraftKings Pick 6. Think of DraftKings Pick 6 as your way, as a pitch right down the middle, right in your wheelhouse, because it's the easiest way to play for cash and take a shot at a big win. You just select 2 or more players and choose if they'll have more or less of a stat. So right now, if you're looking at a Cardinals pitcher, I would take more on those innings pitched. And I'm looking at a Cardinals player, I'm going to take less on the strikeouts, because right now Brant Brown has them locked into the plate and they are not striking out. They're not working pitchers deep very much, but they're also not striking out. Pick 6 is available in most states, including California, Texas, Georgia, and of course, Missouri. Get in play now. Cash in on your baseball knowledge. New players get $50 in Pick 6 credits instantly on just a $5 entry. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app and use code STL Sports right there on your screen. STL Sports. That's code STL Sports for new customers to play $5, get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Better payouts, bigger wins only with Pick 6 from DraftKings. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 and over. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 14 days. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
And that is also...
Sorry, sorry. Speaking of DraftKings, I did want to shout out Eric Sontag for his landing of his bet on this match. He did have a same-game parlay at -120 odds for the Crew on a double chance to winner tie and then under 3.5 goals. And that bet was up to -130 odds when combined. And that did hit. That's his, I believe, 3rd straight hit after going 0 for 5 at the start of the season for Eric Sontag. So if you do want to get in on the action, on the fun, on your sports betting, go to sportshubstl.com and check out Eric Sontag's picks. He's covering all sports in St. Louis. He's covering the Blues, City, the Cardinals, Mizzou, SLU, the Battlehawks. He's putting bets all over the place. And if you need help on your gambling on DraftKings, definitely check out his picks because they've been good lately. So shout out Eric Sontag for that.
There we go. Obviously, we love Eric Sontag, love the domesticated gamblers. We're trying to get them to change the name to the sophisticated gamblers on the morning show, but they're against it for some reason. I don't know. Ryan Fraley, is it physicality or is it technical skill that's holding City back in the midfield? And honestly, I think it depends on your matchup, because I think with certain players, they might have an issue with the technical skill factor. With other combos, it's the physicality factor. I would say tonight it was more a physicality factor, because it's hard for me to criticize the skill factor of Alfredo Morales and Marcel Hartle. And I know that a lot of people are wondering about Marcel Hartle because he just hasn't seemed to have the same punch in his game from that positioning. Today, I thought he was a little bit quiet. I thought maybe, to your point, not having that third body at times caused an issue, because Columbus was able to just control the midfield, and therefore Marcel Hartle isn't able to make his impact. I just really think that in a game where your buildup wasn't what you wanted it to be, I think you have to look at Marcel Hartel maybe struggling a little bit. But I do think that he's still created multiple key passes from that area, and he did it while touching the ball less and having less overall passes than he did last week at Kansas City. And I thought last week at Kansas City, when he stepped into that role, I thought he was relatively dynamic for what you can expect from a guy playing that deep six the way he was. Tonight, not so much. So I know there's people out there worried about Marcel Hartle. To be honest with you, I'm not 100% sure what the case was with him tonight, but I understand why people are maybe a little bit worried, because you were bringing up earlier with Seti, those two guys who just brought so much punch in the fall of last year. They just haven't brought it so far in the spring of 2025. And I think people are starting to get a little bit worried.
Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely want to touch on Morales too in general. He's not the guy that's supposed to be out there and be flashy, and he's not the guy who's supposed to be out there and being, extremely physical, but he is a guy who's supposed to be out there consistently giving you what you need, and that is simple passes. And I think Morales has done a good job with that. And I think Columbus had a really good game plan, knowing that Leuven and Durkin were both missing from this match, because we saw them crowd the middle of the field. I saw numerous times, I can see flashing through my mind, where Columbus opted not to really utilize their width and bring those players in, with the St. Louis City SC wingbacks actually playing a little bit far wide in these moments. And Columbus was really able to break down the St. Louis City SC midfield by bringing in like four bodies into that midfield with a striker up top. And it was really effective for them, especially on that second goal. It was the exact reason they scored that second goal, that it gave them the lead there in that match. So, definitely things to consider. But when you've got a great squad with a great coach and Wilfred Nancy as well, you have to expect these things to happen. So, it just comes down to finishing your chances once again, harping on it over and over and over again. This is a game that, it doesn't feel like City got horribly outplayed. And that's a good thing to take away from, competing against one of the best teams in the league. So, it's hard for me to be too pessimistic, like I said earlier.
At the same time, you have just lost 4 straight. And
that is true.
The season's long, but Klauss said it today, you can't put yourself behind the 8 ball too far, else it's really hard to get back. So they got to start winning some games. And it doesn't get any easier, because Vancouver Whitecaps, which is not a game I think a lot of people would have circled in the preseason as a tough one, but Vancouver's tops in the West right now, and Brian White's tearing defenses apart. And so, despite the fact we wouldn't expect it, this is going to be a tough matchup for St. Louis City SC next week, and a win would go a very long way. It'll be interesting to see. Do we see a team that tries more possession? Do we see a team that goes more with the press again? Right now, it's hard to tell, and honestly, it's a little frustrating. But if it's more games like this, at least it will lead to some fun, and at least that unpredictable factor will actually be in here.
Yeah, absolutely. Melberg talks about that unpredictability and the nonstop players that he wants to see on the pitch as Rock's room gets infiltrated here. But
we're wrapping up here.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, these are the types of things we saw, against Kansas City. We saw a St. Louis team that came out more attacking minded, was better, didn't, make the most of the chances that they did create. So what did they spend time doing this week? Melberg was focusing on the attack, focusing on finishing. And I think we're going to see a similar theme this week, where in training, we're going to see a lot of finishing and, what do we do when we get these good chances in the final third? Because now we're creating some of them. And then Melberg's also going to be, instructing the defense on how do we deal with these back post runners. Of course, there's no other team in the league really besides the Columbus Crew that you're going to be having to worry about a left center back making a back post run and scoring a goal in a situation like that as a complete like terrorist back post bomber. You're not going to see that from pretty much any other team. So like Melberg said in the post-match presser tonight, you have to look at Vancouver as its own team and you need to plan for them and exactly how are you going to beat that team and not focus too much on what you should have done against Columbus. So I think there's a lot of good to take forward from this match. And I think Melberg has a good task ahead of him. And I'm honestly pretty confident that he'll come out with at least a solid game plan as St. Louis City SC look to host Vancouver Whitecaps FC at Energizer Park in their 9th match of the 2025 MLS regular season.
There it is, a little preview heading into the week here because it's a late on a Sunday, and unfortunately, St. Louis City, they score early. Klauss finally breaks the drought going all the way back to last season, but they fall 2-1 to the now league-leading Columbus Crew. I'm Matthew Rocchio. That is Will Bratton. Thank you to everyone who joined us in the chat today, and this has been the City Hub postgame on Sports Hub STL. Have a great night, St. Louis.